Reyes. Welcome to Eagle News International.
And I'm CJ Hero. Here are tonight's headlines.
A French teacher who had recently shown students cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad is beheaded outside his school in what President Emmanuel Macron called an Islamist terrorist attack.
Thai pro-democracy protesters said Saturday they would defy an emergency decree banning gatherings for a third consecutive day after confrontations the previous night saw riot police use water cannons against the mainly young activists.
And Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern won a landslide victory in New Zealand's general election, leveraging success battling the COVID-19.
So let's step. Coronavirus cases in the United States top 8 million as the world sees the highest ever number reported in a single day, while European countries tighten measures to control the pandemic spread.
Thai pro-democracy protesters said Saturday they would defy an emergency decree banning gatherings for a third consecutive day. After confrontations the previous night saw riot police use water cannons against the mainly young activists. Take a look. About 3,000 demonstrators in the city's main shopping mall district demanded the release of arrested protesters. And some even shouted obscenities against the Prime Minister, Prayut Chan-o-cha, before they were dispersed by police. Free Youth, one of the main protest groups, Saturday morning called on its supporters to return to the streets later on Saturday. And several hundred riot police dispersed the protesters Friday by firing blue-dyed water laced with a chemical agent from the cannons. Police said the dye would mark protesters for future legal action. The youth-led movement has jolted the kingdom's political elite with its demands for the government to step down and reforms of the previously unassailable monarchy. The ultra-wealthy and powerful King Maha Vajiralongkorn has not addressed the civil unrest directly, but during a ceremony broadcast Friday reminded people that Thailand needs people who love the country, people who love the institution of the monarchy. Take a look.
การคนรักชาติการคนรักสถาบันแล้วก็ประสบการณ์ใดๆที่ทำมาหรืองานที่ผ่านมาเอามาใช้เป็นประโยชน์
Thai lawyers for human rights told AFP that 65 activists had been arrested since Tuesday, including 9 of the most prominent figures of the pro-democracy movement. Earlier on Friday, 2 activists were also arrested under a rarely used law banning violence against the Queen because they were among a group surrounding a royal motorcade on Wednesday during a large demonstration. Both men could face life in prison if convicted. A Thai journalist was also briefly detained during the Friday's protest, according to his online news outlet, Prachathai. Premier Prayut Chan-o-cha has extended the emergency decree banning gatherings of more than 4 people until mid-November, ignoring activists' calls for him to resign.
A French teacher who had recently shown students cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad was beheaded outside his school on Friday in what President Emmanuel Macron called an Islamist terrorist attack. Visibly moved, the president said that the entire nation stood ready to defend teachers. Please watch this.
Un de nos concitoyens a été assassiné aujourd'hui parce qu'il enseignait, parce qu'il apprenait à des élèves la liberté d'expression, la liberté de croire et de ne pas croire. Notre compatriote a été lâchement attaqué, a été la victime d'un attentat terroriste, islamiste, caractérisé. Et plus largement, je veux dire ce soir à tous les enseignants de France que nous sommes avec eux, que la nation tout entière sera là à leur côté aujourd'hui et demain pour les protéger, les défendre, leur permettre de faire leur métier, qui est le plus beau qui soit. Faire des citoyens libres.
The man suspected of beheading the French teacher was an 18-year-old Chechen, a source said on Saturday. Identification documents found on the suspect showed he was born in Moscow, but from Russia's southern region of Chechnya. The attacker shouted Allahu Akbar, or God is greatest, as police confronted him, a cry often heard in jihadist attacks. Police have detained 9 people over Friday's attack.
12 civilians were killed and more than 40 people injured in an early hour missile strike on Azerbaijan's second city of Ganja. The strike leveled several rows of buildings in a residential district of the city of 300,000, sharply escalating the conflict between separatist ethnic Armenian forces and Azerbaijan over the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh.
Evde hamısı dağılıbdı, yoxdur. Altında qalanlar var, ölənlər var. Skorun belində səhərdən daşıyır. Neçə nəfərlər ölüb, qılçaları qırılıb, qılçanı.
There was no early official information about the toll from any of the attacks, but AFP reporters in Ganja saw a rescue team remove black bags containing body parts from the scene. One witness even said he saw rescuers pull a small child, 2 women and 4 men from the debris in the minutes immediately after the strike. The attack came only 6 days after a missile struck another residential part of the city of more than 300,000 people, killing 10 civilians. Fighting escalated in the disputed region as the two sides accuse each other of breaking a ceasefire. The current escalation is the deadliest and longest since that 6-year conflict.
Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev vows to take revenge on Armenia after a missile strike killed 12 sleeping people in the city of Ganja, a dramatic escalation in the conflict over the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region. Let's watch this.
Ermənistan rəhbər şəhidlərimizin, günahsız insanların qisasını döyüş meydanında alırıq və alacağıq. Biz heç vaxt mülki əhaliyə qarşı müharibə aparmamışıq, bundan sonra da aparmayacağıq.
Armenian officials denied the attack and accused Azerbaijan of attacking civilian areas. Both sides signed a Russian-brokered truce last weekend, but the conflict has continued. The decades-long Nagorno-Karabakh conflict re-erupted on September 27 and has so far killed more than 700 people, including nearly 80 civilians. The mountainous western region of Azerbaijan has remained under separatist Armenian control since a 1994 ceasefire ended a brutal war that killed 30,000.
And Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern won a landslide victory in New Zealand's general election on Saturday. She thanked the New Zealanders for her win. Let's listen in.
Now more than ever is the time to keep going, to keep working, to grab hold of the opportunities that lay in front of us. So let's step forward together. Ka hoake tono tātou. Let's keep moving.
Ms. Ardern's Labour Party has won 49% of the vote, and she has won a rare outright parliamentary majority. Ardern's campaign pitch focused heavily on her government's success in containing the coronavirus, with New Zealand recording only 25 deaths in a population of 5 million people. Life within New Zealand has largely returned to normal after a strict lockdown earlier this year, barring a brief outbreak in Auckland that has now been contained. The success helped Ardern win a poll she dubbed the COVID election, and the 55% personal approval rating she recorded in opinion polls ahead of the vote demonstrates the bond she has forged with fellow Kiwis in tough times. National Party leader Judith Collins has congratulated Ms. Ardern and promised her party would be a robust opposition.
We needed a team focused absolutely and entirely on New Zealand, and Labour absolutely is.
Here's a review of some of the most remarkable moments of Ardern's 3-year tenure ahead of Saturday's polls.
To form a government for all New Zealanders. The process the Greens are going through. We will, of course, be releasing those agreements. We'll do immediate reaction. Neve Tiaraha Ardern Gayford, or Neve Gayford for short. It means in various forms. It means bright and radiant and snow, which seemed like a good combination for Matariki and for solstice. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you, and peace be upon all of us. He sought many things from his act of terror, but one was notoriety. And that is why you will never hear me mention his name. Today I'm announcing that New Zealand will ban all military-style semi-automatic weapons. Don't say so. Don't dwell on who he is. Dwell on. This decision will mean New Zealand will have the widest ranging and toughest border restrictions of any country in the world. And it felt longer and dragged on in what was already starting to feel like a very long year. But despite that, Aucklanders and New Zealanders stuck to the plan that has worked twice now and beat the virus again.
In other news, U.S. pharmaceutical giant Pfizer says it expects to file for emergency use authorization for its COVID-19 vaccine in late November, around 2 weeks after the November 3 U.S. presidential election. The announcement means the U.S. could have 2 vaccines ready by the end of the year, with Massachusetts biotech firm Moderna aiming for November 25 to seek authorization. President Trump has previously said that he hopes a vaccine will be ready before the vote. The U.S. is the worst hit country in the world, with more than 8 million cases and 218,000 deaths, according to a Johns Hopkins University tracker.
U.S. President Donald Trump fought Friday to recover from sinking election polls by campaigning with a hardline pitch to America's right wing, claiming at rallies in Florida and Georgia that his Democratic opponent, Joe Biden, would deliver communism and a flood of criminal immigrants. Biden, meanwhile, was campaigning in Michigan, where he ripped into Trump's handling of the coronavirus, the strongest issue of his campaign. Trump and Biden.
And we've learned over the last couple of months, Joe Biden is a corrupt politician. He's a corrupt politician. And the Biden family is a criminal enterprise. Frankly, it makes crooked Hillary Clinton look like an amateur.
He said, we have turned the corner. As my grandfather Finnegan might say, we were here, he said, he's gone around the bend. Turn the corner. My Lord. It's not disappearing. In fact, it's on the rise again. It's getting worse, as predicted.
I'll tell you something, though, and it's fair to lock them up. You shouldn't lock them up. Lock up the Bidens. Lock up Hillary. Lock them up.
Just like when he said there were, quote, very fine people on both sides in Charlottesville. Father, as they came out of the fields carrying torches, their veins just bulging, shouting anti-Semitic bile, carrying Nazi flags, accompanied by the Ku Klux Klan. And when a young woman was killed protesting, the president was asked, what do you think? And he said something no president has ever heard. There were very fine people on both sides. Those words were heard just like when he stood on the debate stage with me and refused to denounce white supremacists, but told that right-wing extremist group to, quote, stand back and stand by. An American president not only shocked us, but it stunned the world.
Trump and Biden are to hold a final debate next Thursday. They had been scheduled to hold one this Thursday, but Trump backed out after it was changed into a virtual debate following his COVID-19 diagnosis. The candidates held rival town hall events instead. Trump, a former reality television star, won't be happy about the ratings. 14.1 million tuned in to Biden's event, while 13.5 million watched Trump, according to Nielsen ratings data.
And worldwide coronavirus cases have climbed into an all-time high, with more than 39 million of more than 330,000 per day. Europe is also facing unprecedented number of cases, with spikes in Germany, the Czech Republic, Italy, and Poland. Let's listen in.
Fall-winter surge continues to unfold in Europe, with exponential increases in daily cases and matching percentage increases in daily deaths. The evolving epidemiological situation in Europe raises great concern. Daily numbers of cases are up, hospital admissions are up, and COVID is now the 5th leading cause of deaths, and the bar of 8,000 deaths per day has now been reached. The region has registered the highest weekly incidence of COVID-19 cases since the beginning of the pandemic, with almost 700,000 cases reported. Confirmed cases have now surpassed 7 million, moving from 6 to 7 million cases in just 10 days. We record 2 to 3 times more cases per day compared to the April peak. We still observe 5 times less deaths, and the doubling time in hospital admissions is still 2 to 3 times longer. Reverse its course on its own, but we will. A proportional and targeted response is the way forward. Measures are tightening up in many countries in Europe, and this is good because they are absolutely necessary. They are appropriate and necessary responses to what the data is telling us.
Belgium on Friday ordered all cafes and restaurants to close for 4 weeks and impose a midnight to 5 a.m. curfew, and people must work from home. Bars and restaurants have now been closed nationwide for a month. It comes as the number of people being admitted to intensive care is doubling every day. On Friday, Paris and other French cities marked their final night before an antivirus curfew comes into effect. And Belgian Deputy Prime Minister Georges Gilkenet said bars and restaurants would be closed for 4 weeks starting Monday, as hospitals are now clogged. But in neighboring Germany, a Berlin court overturned nighttime restrictions. In England, millions of people were just hours away from stricter measures, including a ban on household mixing, while bars and restaurants closed in Spain's northeastern region of Catalonia. In Greece, meanwhile, the densely populated northern area of Kozani went into a new lockdown.
Austria's Foreign Minister Alexander Schallenberg is self-isolating after testing positive for COVID-19, his ministry said Saturday, as the country posted a new daily record for infections. Schallenberg could have contracted coronavirus during a meeting of European Union foreign ministers in Luxembourg on Monday, a foreign ministry spokeswoman told the APA news agency. He said he has not presented any symptoms so far. The minister has cancelled a trip planned for the coming days to Britain, Denmark, Greece and Cyprus. All members of the conservative government of Chancellor Sebastian Kurz will be tested as a precaution on Saturday. Austria reported a new high of 2,300 cases on Saturday. With a population of 8.8 million, Austria has also recorded 882 deaths since the start of the pandemic. Schallenberg is just the latest in a string of politicians to contract the disease, including U.S. President Donald Trump, Brazil's Jair Bolsonaro, and British Prime Minister Boris Johnson.
Meanwhile, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, Director General of the WHO, said dexamethasone is the only treatment to have proven effective against COVID-19 in patients with a severe form of the disease. Take a look.
For the moment, the corticosteroid dexamethasone is still the only therapeutic shown to be effective against COVID-19 for patients with severe disease.
From the Solidarity Therapeutics trial, coordinated by the World Health Organization, indicate that remdesivir, hydroxychloroquine, lopinavir, ritonavir, and interferon regimens appear to have little or no effect on 28-day mortality or the in-hospital course of COVID-19 among hospitalized patients.
Dexamethasone has been endorsed as a COVID-19 treatment by both the World Health Organization and the European Medicines Agency, but it remains something of a drug of last resort. Early evidence suggests it is only effective among the most serious cases. More recent research has suggested that other steroids may also play a role in reducing mortality among patients requiring hospital care. An antiviral originally developed to treat Ebola, remdesivir, was found to reduce the length of hospital stays for coronavirus sufferers from 15 to 11 days on average, according to a study published in May in the New England Journal of Medicine. However, a preprint by the WHO on Friday found that the drug appeared to have little or no effect on coronavirus mortality or the length of hospitalization among more than 11,000 hospitalized patients across 30 countries. And the data have yet to be peer-reviewed in a scientific journal and appear to contradict early U.S. studies.
Manchester's residents react as the city gets ready to implement new Tier 3 coronavirus restrictions, the highest level of regional lockdown under British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's localized strategy. Let's listen in.
And yeah, so I'm really proud of Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Manchester, for really The way the BBC put it was bending the government over a barrel and really sticking hard on this one and defending those people, because the economic package they announced it won't keep people alive. That's the dangerous part.
It really doesn't surprise me at all. Since we went into the first lockdown, I think a lot of people have stuck to the rules, and a lot of people have behaved pretty badly, you know, so it really doesn't surprise me at all.
I don't know how well Tier 3 would work out, because we've already been in Tier 2 for months now, and it doesn't seem to have helped much. So maybe like the circuit breaker might be a better thing to try.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson threatened Friday to impose new coronavirus restrictions on Manchester after a standoff with the city's leaders risked undermining his strategy to drive down infections. Johnson imposed further restrictions on about 1.5 million people in nearby Lancashire on Friday in a bid to bring down spiraling transmission rates in northwest England. But Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham is fighting against plans for his city to also be moved into Tier 3 without extra funding from central government. The standoff comes as different parts of the UK become increasingly subject to varying degrees of restrictions, particularly in devolved Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Britain has been the hardest hit country in Europe, with over 43,000 deaths of those testing positive for the virus.
Meanwhile, U.S. authorities have accused a former Mexican defense minister of smuggling thousands of kilograms of illegal drugs across the border in exchange for bribes. Salvador Cienfuegos was taken into custody in Los Angeles. He was a key figure in ex-President Enrique Peña Nieto's 2012 to 2018 government. The 72-year-old retired general, nicknamed the Godfather, allegedly abused his position to help the H2 cartel, an extremely violent Mexican drug trafficking organization, according to the documents. The prosecution said the evidence included thousands of BlackBerry messages between Cienfuegos and cartel members intercepted by the authorities. The charges are punishable in the U.S. with a minimum of 10 years in prison and a maximum of life imprisonment.
Quienes no respetan a las personas.
Chilean police fire water cannons at protesters in Santiago as thousands gather in Italy Square to demonstrate against the government of Sebastián Pinera ahead of a referendum in which Chileans will decide whether to replace the constitution dating from the era of the late dictator Augusto Pinochet. The widespread demonstrations saw Chileans take to the streets to protest inequality, inadequate pensions, and the country's deeply criticized healthcare and education systems. They quickly boiled over into violence that wrought billions of dollars in damage to public infrastructure and private businesses. Others, however, believe holding a constitutional referendum is a SOP to protesters and nothing much will change. Months of coronavirus lockdown in Santiago quietened the protests, but demonstrations have flared again around Plaza Italia after authorities lifted confinement measures ahead of the referendum.
We'll take a short break. Eagle News will be right back.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced, eagle news, because we live in interesting times.
Welcome back. Malacanang on Saturday welcomed the House of Representatives' approval of the more than 4.5 trillion peso general appropriations bill on third and final reading on Friday evening. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said the president has several times articulated the importance of the timely passage of the budget to fund its interventions to ease the adverse effects of the pandemic. A total of 267 lawmakers approved House Bill 7727 or the 2021 GAB on Friday after the plenary passed the measure on third reading on the same day. Only 6 lawmakers opposed while no one abstained from voting.
Still here in the Philippines, according to DILG Undersecretary Jonathan Malaya, authorities has lifted its ban on non-essential outbound travel of Filipinos effective October 21. The only requirements would be a visa, confirmed round-trip ticket, health insurance, signed risk declaration form, and negative antigen result taken within 24 hours prior to departure. Again, let's listen in.
Tama po, starting October 21, lahat po ng travel regardless of purpose ay pinapayagan na po ng Interagency Task Force at hindi na po kailangan humingi ng exemption mula sa Department of Foreign Affairs. Ang kailangan lamang po ay meron pong, of course, a valid visa to the country of destination, meron confirmed round-trip ticket, health insurance, at kailangan din po silang pumirma ng Bureau of Immigration Declaration sa check-in counter that they acknowledge the risk involved in traveling. At very important po ay kailangan din meron po silang negative antigen result 24 hours before date of departure. At antigen test na ito will be facilitated by the airline itself.
Meanwhile, World Bank President David Malpass urges governments and corporations to provide more debt relief for poor nations in his opening remarks during the bank's virtual annual meeting, and adds that they had also approved up to $12 billion for vaccines and their distribution in countries where access is limited. Take a look.
And we just yesterday, I'm pleased to announce that the board approved the vaccine, the extension of the health emergency programs to up to $12 billion for vaccines and therapeutics and distribution of those in countries that don't otherwise have access.
Malpass has been particularly strident in his calls for governments and corporations to provide more debt relief for poor nations. The group of 20 major economies earlier this year agreed to a debt service suspension for the poorest 43 countries, freeing up $5 billion through the end of the year, short of the $8 to $11 billion expected. The G20 approved a 6-month extension of the Debt Service Suspension Initiative, or DSSI, on Wednesday, but Mr. Malpass has continued to raise concerns about the lack of transparency in lending, especially though not only by China.
You know, the recession has been deep, one of the deepest since the Great Depression, and for many developing countries and the people in the poorest countries, it is truly a depression, a catastrophic event, and it is continuing to add to the ranks of those in extreme poverty. So it's important for the people in the poorest countries to see an actual reduction in the amount of debt, a ray of hope for the future. And so I was pleased to see that the G20 was approaching debt reduction. I think there are more steps that are needed in order to achieve meaningful debt relief for the poor. And so there will need to be flexibility in economies so that people can move to new jobs and position, and the country can be prepared for a post-COVID global economy. We know it's going to be different from the pre-COVID economy. We don't know exactly how, and that will only evolve over time.
Twitter has changed its policy on hacked content amid the uproar over its handling of an unverified story about Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden. Now it will no longer remove hacked material unless it has been shared by hackers and their associates. It will also label tweets that might contain hacked content instead of blocking links from being shared. The move comes after Twitter blocked links to the New York Post articles that claims to show that Hunter Biden introduced his father to an executive at a Ukrainian energy company, Burisma. The accuracy of the Post story has been called into question by several fact-checking organizations. Ignalus will be back for more news. Please don't go away.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business every Saturday from 5 to 6 p.m. Open for Business, from vision to action.
Ipapakita ko sa inyo, halimbawa, babes, can you join me here? Di ba ikaw ang maging inspirasyon ko?
Ay nako, ito talaga, babes, nakakahiya ha?
Mga kabarangay, dapat ay bibigyan nyo ng pangalan ang plantitas ninyo. Siyempre, sa akin, ang ibibigay kong pangalan ay babes.
Bigyan mo pangalan. Yes, babes.
Babes, pwede ba makahingi ng kiss?
Isang nitong taong yun, ha? O, isa lang, ha? Ano yun? May nadinig akong kiss. Kiss? Sinong magkikiss? Oo, kiss daw eh. Gusto.
Ba't nakikitawa kayo? Pambira kayo mga kaibigan, oh.
Adios! Adios!
Tayong lahat saya-saya.
Back in Thailand, thousands of Thai pro-democracy protesters massed in multiple locations across Bangkok today, again defying an emergency decree banning gatherings for the third consecutive day after confrontations saw riot police use water cannon on peaceful demonstrators. Take a look. Officers earlier dispersed thousands of protesters on Friday night by spraying water laced with blue dye and a chemical agent to mark participants for future legal action. But the escalation in police tactics has now cowed the burgeoning youth-led protest movement. The movement is demanding the resignation of a premier, first brought to power in a military coup, and a reform of the kingdom's powerful monarchy. One of the pro-democracy movement's main organizing groups called on its supporters to return to the streets Saturday afternoon. An hour before the scheduled 4 p.m. protest start, the group announced 3 different locations for rallies, outsmarting authorities that had closed roads to 2 suspected venues that ended up not being the meeting points. In the city's northern Latprao district, hundreds gathered in the middle of a street with helmets and gas masks ready. Across the Chao Phraya River, nearly 1,000 rallied in the western Wongyanyai district, chanting "Long live the people, down with dictatorship," while in southeastern Udomsuk, a similar show of force brought busy traffic to a standstill. Operators of both the SkyTrain and underground rail networks had shut down services citywide to prevent protesters from joining. Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha extended an emergency decree banning gatherings of more than 4 people by another month on Friday.
In the U.S., high winds and high temperatures are creating dangerous fire conditions in the West. San Francisco and Phoenix had record highs today. Palm Springs hit a 103 degrees for the 147th time this year, and that is a record. In Colorado, 60 per mile hour wind are fanning the Cameron Peak fire. That's the largest wildfire in the state's history. And today, the Trump administration reversed itself on approved federal disaster aid for California, which is having its worst fire season ever.
And finally in our news, Tyronn Lue, who coached the Cleveland Cavaliers to the 2016 NBA title, has agreed to become the next head coach of the Los Angeles Clippers, according to multiple reports. ESPN and USA Today reported that Lue has agreed to replace Doc Rivers, who parted ways with the Clippers just over 2 weeks ago, with ESPN saying the deal was for 5 years. Lue, 43 years old, served as the lead assistant coach for the Clippers this past season when they lost to Denver in the Western Conference semifinals.
And that's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm CJ Hero. See you again on Monday.
I'll see you back on Monday, CJ. And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.
Kahirapan sa bayan, mga suliranin, pagkakaintindi ay pinagkakait.
Sisilip na ang liwanag sa kalangitan, sama-sama nating ipaglaban. Bangon Pilipinas, bumangon ka, sa tulong ng mga bagong bayani.
Ng pagluha sa salubong ng ngiti, matatanaw mo ang pag-asa sa tulong ng mga bagong bayani. Nasasabit na muli, makalipad
matanyag. Tinatanaw ang araw na sisikat, kapit ang pag-asa. Tayo'y magkaisa at sa Diyos tumawag. Sisilip na ang liwanag sa galangitan. Sama-sama natin paglaban. Bangon Pilipinas, bumangon ka. Sa tulong ng mga bagong bayani, hihintuin ang pagluha sa salubong ang ngiti. Matatanaw mo ang pag-asa sa tulong ng mga bagong bayani. Ni alintana ang bantang sinasalubong, basta sa bayan ay handa laging tumulong. Bangon Pilipinas, bumangon ka. Sa tulong ng mga bagong bayani, hihintuin ang pagluha sa salubong ang ngiti. Matatanaw mo ang pag-asa sa tulong ng mga bagong bayani. Bangon Pilipinas, bumangon ka. Sa tulong ng mga bagong bayani, hihintuin ang pagluha sa salubong ng ngiti. Matatanaw mo ang pag-asa sa tulong ng mga bagong bayani. Matatanaw mo ang pag-asa sa tulong ng mga bagong bayani.
Ang layunin ng Unlad Kaagapay sa Hanapbuhay, itong programang ito, sa pangunguna ng ating tagapamahalang pangkalahatan ng kapatid Waldo Manalo, ay masasabi nating 4 na layunin. Una ay akitin natin tao sa paghahanap buhay. Ang ikalawang layunin na ituro sa tao kung ano ang iba't ibang hanap buhay na maaari niyang gawin sa bahay lang. At ikatlo ay turuan natin ng tao na magbigay ng panahon sa mga hanap buhay ukol sa agrikultura. At ang ika-4 ay bibigyan natin ng pagkakataon ang mga kapatid at hindi man kapatid na mabigyan sila ng trabaho. Kaya sana ay itong ating programang magtagumpay sapagkat napakaganda ng layunin nito.
Marami mang pagsubok na dumaraan,
Naganap ang kahirapan, kawalan ang hanap buhay.
Sa atin ay may aagapay, sa pagbangon may karamay.
lakasan natin ang ating loob, malalampasan natin sa tulong ng Diyos.
Kaagapay sa hanap buhay, labanan natin ang kahirapan, magsikap, maghawak kamay. Kinabukasan ay uunlad, may kaagapay sa hanap buhay.
ay hindi alam kung saan kukuha. Pangtusto sa pamilya, paano kikita?
Huwag mawawalan ng pag-asa, di ka nag-iisa. Ang unlad na biyaya ng Diyos, sama-sama nating kitaguyon. Kaagapay sa hanap buhay, labanan natin ang kahirapan. Magsikap, maghawak kamay. Kinabukasan ay uunlad, may kaagapay sa hanap
Tara na, kumilos na
sa iyong kamay, nakasalala. Tutulungan ka na unlad, may kaagapay sa hanap buhay, sa hanap buhay. Labanan natin ang kahirapan, magsikap, maghawak kamay. Kinabukasan ay uunlad, may kaagapay sa hanap buhay.
Dahil sa COVID-19 na itala
Nagdulot
sa
ito ng pangamba
Kontra COVID-19, may
mapigilan
na
ang COVID-19.
COVID-19 is spreading all throughout the country.
Darating ang panahong ang langit ay kulimlim. Sa ayaw at sa gusto mo, sasapit ang gabi magdidilim. Hindi kailangang kumapit sa patalim, bagkus lumapit, umawak ng maigting.
Kainting na panalangin, ibulong sa kanya anumang daing at hiling.
Walang makakapigil sa pusong nanggigigil, hindi titigil.
Na maniwala, magtiwala, di ka dapat mabahala, manatili kang mapapalagi.
Tumingala, hindi hihinto sa pagtakbo. Tuloy ang laban, maghihintay na may paninindigan. Sulong-sulong sa pagsalubong, sa tagumpay, kay tagal na hinintay. Wala na sanang aayaw, ngayon pa ba manghihinayang? Sa pawis at luha na pinuhunan, sabay-sabay na isigaw. Tuloy ang laban.
Yeah. Kalamitan ako'y inuunos, pundasyon ko'y nagmistulang mga tulos, katawang lupa'y hilahod ng lubos. Barya mga buti pinupulbos, realidad ba to o di tunay? Dilan o piring magkasing kulay, kapiling ng dilim at nagbubungkay. Pilit lang ba ako o nasa hukay? Dali natatakot, kinakatakutan, kakilang-kilang at kinikilabutan. Pagsubok at takot ako, siya ay pinalibutan. Sa Diyos ako natakot at hindi kinalibutan.
Walang makakapigil sa pusong nanggigigil, hindi titigil.
Na maniwala, magtiwala, di ka dapat mabahala, manatili kang mababalagi.
Tumingala, hindi hihinto sa pagtakbo. Tuloy ang laban, maghihintay na may paninindigan. Sulong-sulong sa pagsalubong, sa tagumpay, kay tagal na hinintay. Wala na sanang aayaw, ngayon pa ba manghihinayang? Sa pawis at luha na pinuhunan, sabay-sabay na naisisigaw. Tuloy ang laban na ako'y nasasaktan. Kahit na aking nararanasan ang kalungkutan.
Ang bawat hakbang ay pinag-aralan, titinaging nahirapan. Di malilimutan ang galit ng pagkakalbo habang nahihilong lakas ng loob ang nabubuo. May dismayo, madalapit ang masitulalalang sa kalalitan na pinag-iitan. Masasandalan, mapagsusumbungan,
Harang malalampasan. Tuloy ang laban. Walang makakapigil. Walang makakapigil. Walang makakapigil. Hindi hinto sa pagtakbo. Tuloy ang laban. Maghihintay na may paninindigan. Sulong-sulong sa pagsalubong. Sa tagumpay kay tagal na hinintay. Wala na sanang ngaayaw. Ngayon pa ba manghihinayang? Sa pawis at luha na binuhunan. Sabay-sabay na isigaw. Tuloy ang laban.
maniwala, magtiwala, di ka dapat mabahala, manatiling ang mababa.
Pero kami, tuloy ang laban. Tuloy ang laban.
Tuloy ang laban.
Pero kami, tuloy ang laban.
Tuloy ang laban.
This is Net 25, a commercial UHF television station owned and operated by the Eagle Broadcasting Corporation. Transmitting on a 50 kilowatt output with NTC permit number BSD-0184-2020 REN, authorizing this station to operate until July 12, 2023. Net 25 studios and transmitter are located at number 25 Central Avenue, New Era, Quezon City. Net 25 is headed by the following personnel duly licensed by the Professional Regulations Commission and the National Telecommunications Commission. Engineer Armando C. Bonifacio Jr., PECE number 838. Engineer Bernard N. Pangulayan, PECE number 869. Engineer Randy A. Velasco, PECE number 555, with first-class radio telephone operators, Modesto V. De Vera, 96-1 PNCR-18494, Fretz C. Moliena, 93-1 PVI-6551, Crisostomo G. Narvaez Jr., 96-1 PII-17628. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Net 25 signing off.
Bayang magiliw, perlas ng silang